if you need to in that area as well. Okay, guys. So what we're doing today is called session number 2. So the series of continuing education that we're doing is repeating some of the training sessions that I typically would take a brand new clinic or a brand new user through Practice Perfect when they're first starting to use the system. So for those of you on the phone that kind of already have a lot of experience with Practice Perfect, this might be a review for you might already know some of the things I'm going to show you. I'll also be showing you some of the newer features that are available in the system for those of you who are going through an upgrade or want to see some of the newer features. So the first training session that we did is on the setup of the software, where we have choices for setting up certain things to act certain ways. The colors in the scheduler, items, how we want the scheduler to view and show us, the profile of the patient, how we set up payers, how we set up for certain information that happens with billing within Canada or certain provinces. So that's what we talked about in the first session. I will be kind of brushing over those a little bit today just to do a quick little review, but the intense part of that was really session number 1. Today in session number 2, we focus a lot on front desk, things that tend to happen at a front desk situation, and then how we handle those things or what our options are to handle those things. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, so that you know, is scheduling appointments, looking up future appointments, finding past history or future appointments for patients, charging, taking money, giving invoices and receipts, TELUS, how we set up for TELUS integration, along with some of the other funders that we can direct bill to now as well. So for those of you with me today, I'm hoping most of you already know how to get to the scheduler and how to book an appointment, but we are going to review that. So on the left-hand side of the screen, on your operations drop-down bar, when you click on the word schedule, that's what we're looking at today, the scheduler. My particular username and password is set up to see everybody's scheduler. And then I can toggle and choose specific providers. I can choose from my locations. I can kind of see everything. Sometimes your username and password will only show you, as a therapist, your own scheduler within the software. So it just kind of depends how you've set up your username and password. Right now, what we're looking at is called the weekly viewer, but I'm focusing on just my one therapist name at the top. And then typically in the scheduler, we're trying to start booking with 3 different types of appointments. There's usually existing patients. Somebody on our list wants to come back and book an appointment. That's probably the most common. And then we're going to book brand new patients, people we've never really seen before. We don't even have their name or email or phone number in the system yet. And then we're going to book non-bookable time, blocking out the scheduler, we call that, for lunches and meetings and time we just don't want to be available to book. So no matter what it is that we're booking, we always start the same way. We always try to find a date and a time and a therapist to schedule an appointment. So on the screen right now, we have these little white and gray areas on the screen. In my scenario here, gray represents the time slots I don't want to be able to book appointments. White represents the time slots that are wide open to book. So if I can see an area on my screen that's kind of wide open to book, easy enough, I'm just going to click on it. If I want to move around, though, to different dates within the scheduler, I can start using my function bar at the top of the screen. And I have little arrows to move me around. So I have a single arrow pointing to the right and the left. Those single arrows will move us throughout the scheduler one day forwards or one day backwards. On the left, we have little arrows with lines at the end. And those move us just a little bit quicker, forwards and backwards, 1 week at a time. And then in the middle, we have a little red circle. When you hover, that's called the Today button, also known as the Panic button. That'll always bring you back to today's date. So if you're moving around and, oh my gosh, where am I? Get me back to today, hit the little Panic button, and it will always bring you back to today's date. If you don't like using the arrows to move around, we do have a drop-down calendar. You just simply pick the day or the dates that you're trying to schedule for, but the little panic will always bring you back. Okay, so we always start the same way. Find a date, find a time, find a therapist. If we're booking an existing patient, you can stay on your time slot and you have 2 choices. You can just simply double click on that time slot, or you can use the green plus click on the function bar. so double click or green plus click. The advanced way to book, and this only works if you have your patient 100% set up the way that you want. If you do a right click, you can actually book a quick appointment that way as well. Your insert button will also work for that as well. I like to teach you to double click or do the green plus click because it gives us the most amount of options when booking. So this officially is called your booking screen, and you're just starting at the top and you're working your way down. Is this the right client? If not, pick another client from your list. Is this the right incident? Again, if not, pick another one. Do we know the fee code we're going to be charging the patient? Sometimes we just don't know the answer to that question. So you can book a patient not knowing what you're going to be charging them. And then continue down. Is this the amount of time we'd like to schedule them for? We can adjust that time. We can write a little note if we need to. Oops, there's my little reminder. I'm going to show you that in just a second. You can write a little note on the file. You can change your color if colors represent different types of appointments or types of patients. Otherwise, if you have a color that represents sometimes the type of patient and that never changes, you can attach that color to a patient when you're setting them up. So if we stopped right now, that would be a one-time appointment. The second tab would be to repeat or recur the same appointment. So you can tell the system, this patient books every Monday, Wednesday, Friday the same way, and we just keep that going until we enter a stop date. The third option, which doesn't happen too often with patients, but you could book other providers, other therapists in the exact same appointment. You can select all the other therapists you want included in the same appointment. Okay. So if we're all set, we're going to hit the OK button. I'm not going to do that, but that would put your patient into the software and their scheduled appointment. So that's an existing patient. We're going to do that again. Date, time, therapist, double click or green plus click, fill in all the blanks, change all the options, say OK when complete. Okay. The next type of appointment you typically book is for a brand new patient, somebody we don't have their name, their address, their phone number in the system yet. So if we try to double click or green plus click, they're just simply not in the list to choose from. So that means we have to quickly add them to the screen first. The fastest way to do that is actually to stay in the scheduler and use the little icon up on your function bar. Looks like a tiny person with a green plus sign for new client entry. You could alternatively leave the scheduler, go to the left, use the word clients and hit the green plus sign over there. But if you want to quickly do this while you're in the scheduler, just simply use the little icon new client. And from here, you're just filling in the basics, as much information as you normally collect on a patient. Theoretically, you just need the name and a phone number maybe. You probably know why they're coming in for treatment. We have some kind of description. You probably know the division, the group that you're going to put them in. You might even know the color you're going to book them. Sometimes you just don't know that until the patient shows up and we get them to fill out some paperwork. So just fill in as much as you can. From there, you're going to say, OK, I'm not going to do that. And that would put your patient up with all the other patients in the list. So now you could simply just double click or green plus click, and that patient would be in the system now for you to schedule. Okay, you might schedule them longer the first time. You might have a color that represents the patient is brand new. You might put a message saying the patient is brand new, and then you book them like normal. Okay. The third type of appointment that you're booking in the scheduler is more of this gray time on the screen, time we don't want to be booking patients. We call those blocks, and usually blocks are things like lunches and meetings. I'm out of the office, don't book me during this time. You start exactly the same way, date, time, therapist, but up on the function bar you have a little square block to block that time. And from there, you have all the same options, all the same tabs as a patient, with two exceptions. You usually have to describe the block. Why is it that we're not booking? And the colors that you use oftentimes aren't as interesting as patients. But in theory, that's the only two differences. A block appointment is not a bookable time. Now, I'm going to correct myself. Sometimes clinics use blocks to reserve certain appointments. So some of our clinics enter a block at certain times throughout the month to only be able to book new appointments during that time. If that is your scenario, then you will untick this little box at the bottom that inherently makes the block unavailable time. You would untick that box to make it available time to book. And then your booking in the system can have an appointment booked over top of it. So it's like a reservation if you untick that box. Okay. And then okay when you're ready to commit. So all types of appointments, whether they're blocks, existing patients, brand new patients, you can always manipulate them once you've booked them. You can stretch them, you can shrink them, you can pick them up and move them somewhere else on the screen. You can right-click on your appointments and you get tons of options when you right-click. You can do things like change the color on that appointment, delete it, copy it, go somewhere else, paste it, lots of different options. Okay, so the first little visual that you start to see, of course, is usually the color. The color is telling you something, whatever that means at your clinic. In my scenario, the color means the type of patient that we're booking. The next little visual that you might see is the blue section of your screen. There's two of those, one at the top, one at the bottom left. So the patient that you're on in the scheduler, their name will always appear at the top of the screen with any financial information, such as what payers are involved, how much coverage do they have left, does the patient have a balance? That's the kind of stuff that always appears at the top of the screen. If you want to customize that a little bit at the top of the screen, you can always right-click and add your own notes up there, and they will follow the patient around all the time at the top as well. Okay. Otherwise, the most important message I usually say is the financial coverage, and that's depleting usually over time. If we have a limit to the amount of money that we're approved for that we can bill to, or the number of visits or units or a time range that we're limited to, the system is keeping track on that information for us all the time, and it's depleting. Every time we say we just treated the patient today, that number changes at the top of the screen. The bottom section of your screen on the left is called Key Patient Information. And again, that's always following your patient around as well as you're working on them. And things like a picture, their birth date, what therapist is typically working on file, the group that we have them filed into, their division, their phone numbers, future scheduled appointments. That's the stuff that's always available on the bottom left as we work throughout that patient in the system. Another visual for you is the font on the patient's name. So I'm just going to highlight two different fonts here. On my test motor vehicle patient here, their font is italic font. It's slanted a little bit to the right, as opposed to Mr. Test Extended Healthcare over here. He's a regular font, regular straight up and down. So the difference is anyone in the italic font means no future appointments. This is their last scheduled appointment if their name goes into italics. So in theory, we want all the italics to book more appointments. If their name is a normal looking font, it means they've got something booked in the future. How many appointments in the next date will be following at the bottom left-hand side of the screen for their future count. But sometimes that's still not enough information. We need to know, well, who's it scheduled with? What time is it scheduled? Let's get a list of all those appointments. So if that is the request, then while we're on the patient's name, up at the top of the screen, we have a Find Appointments icon. And you actually don't have to be on a specific patient to get started with. So the Find Appointments icon looks like a little calendar. Hopefully you guys can see that. I'm just hovering over top of a little calendar. That is the fastest way to find future scheduled appointments. Just make sure you're on the right patient or choose another patient and scoot down to the bottom left to say pending. And that will list out all future appointments that are scheduled. You can print these and give that as a list to the patient with all their scheduled appointments and times. You can also do a number of cool little searches. You just simply change your parameters. If you're looking for how many times this guy has canceled in the system in the past 30 days, you would just plunk in a date range and then do a search. Or perhaps you're looking for all of the patients who have scheduled appointments who have canceled in the last 60 days and you want a list of that. The system will search for that information, and then from there you can preview a report. And your report will also show the little reasons that we've been giving for people who are canceling and no-showing. Okay, so a very handy little tool. I'll just highlight him again in case you missed him on the function bar. He looks like a little scheduler, and he's called the Find Appointment Search. Okay. Okay, the last little visual to focus on right now are the little pictures that are starting to appear at the top right-hand side of our appointment. So I'm just circling a few here as examples. So everybody kind of looks the same if we look throughout them. To get started with, they all have a little hourglass appearing at the top right, and then as we move to the left, they're starting to change a little bit on patients. Some have little money bags, some have a blue comment box, some have a little notepad icon. So all those little things are telling us a story. So typically at the very top right-hand side of every appointment, that symbol looks like an hourglass to get started, and that symbol represents the status of the appointment attendance-wise. Typically, most people never stay pending. You eventually have to pick something else. Most people go through arrived and complete. So arrived means patient did show up for the appointment. We're working on our list of things that would make this patient complete. And when those things are done, they become complete. And then we have canceled, did not attend, no show, rebook, that kind of thing. So we have a symbol for every status of attendance, basically. So as you move through them, if you upgrade to the latest versions, I believe this is version 234 and beyond. Don't quote me on that. I think it's the last couple of updates. When you cancel or no-show or reschedule a patient, you can actually control reasons that will appear in a drop-down list. So I have set up these particular reasons that are given over and over again. So when someone cancels in my system and I say that they are sick, as an option in my drop-down list, it automatically types out this little standard sentence, and then of course I can free type whatever else I want from there. In addition, at the bottom left, I can make that comment add itself automatically to a patient's contact log. So it can record in the log how many times the patient has had a cancellation or a sickness. The contact log, for those of you that don't know, we're going to review this more in session number 3. It's this little phone icon that follows a patient around on every screen, and that's a contact log. It's meant to record conversations or little notes on a patient file, so we can have the attendance automatically record in there. Okay. A canceled appointment then will either visually show on your screen or disappear depending on your setting that you've chosen for yourself. I've chosen to keep them on the screen. My cancels, no-shows, and reschedules will have a little notepad keeping track of why patients are changing their appointment status, and you just hover over top of the note to read what it has to say. If you want to add one of those notes on your own after you have booked an appointment, you just simply right-click and add an appointment note. Or remember, while you're booking the appointment, you also have your little notepad here. Okay. Visually, I should point out that a canceled appointment on your screen, even a reschedule, is an open time slot. You can actually take another appointment and stick it in that same time slot. And if you do that, we call it a double book. It means two things are booked at the exact same time. One's not going to show up, it's a cancel, but the other appointment is also happening at the same time. If you don't have an appointment to slide into that time slot, you book it just like it's not there. Just pretend like that pink appointment that's canceling is not there. Just simply go to the green plus click like you normally would on your function bar, pick another patient, and then book them in that time slot. Okay. Okay, so from here, I want to point out, sometimes you have a brand new patient that you've scheduled. You know that you didn't collect enough information on them when we first scheduled them. All we've collected is their name, maybe a phone number. So now that they show up, we get them to fill out some paperwork. We get them to fill out a consent form. We have to fill out a little bit more information in their profile. So the fastest way to get to a profile when you're in the scheduler is just simply hit enter. Everybody wants to double click. That's why I want to point that out. Just be on the name of the person in the scheduler and hit the enter button. So the profile we talked a lot about in the first training session, but I really want to go over it again just really quickly in this training session because it really is important. The profile is that place that we record all our patients' contact information. So we record things like name, address, phone number, birth date, birth date, gender, maybe a picture of our patient, their payment information, optional, guardian details if they're underage, extra phone numbers or contacts if we run out of room, and then all the incidents or claims that we want to record for that patient. So incidents is like the current case or the current claim that you're working on. Some of our clinics separate the claims by discipline. They have a current physiotherapy claim as opposed to a current chiro claim because we're keeping track of different coverage. So that very much is possible. They would just have multiple incidents. They could also have older incidents listed in here that are discharged. So typically the main details that you want to record on an incident, there's my reminder again. I will get to that, I promise. Currently, the typical things that we want to record on an incident would be a description, the main therapist working on file, is there a cause of injury, is it officially a work-related or motor vehicle type claim, do we need a referring physician, do we want to record where they actually were referred by, did they find us on our website or Yellow Pages, their friend referred them, and then divisions and colors if appropriate. As we go in now to the blue sub-tabs of information, some types of clients need this type of information. So TELUS, for those of you submitting directly through Extended Healthcare through the TELUS portal, through Practice Perfect, you need an injury date. It is a required field. For Ontario clinics submitting through motor vehicle insurance, you also eventually need some ICD-10 codes, some injury or diagnostic codes listed here in addition to the injury date. Work-related injuries also need injury date. Okay, that's the type of stuff that's recorded in statistics. The billing rules tab, I'll describe as probably the most important of the tabs. It's the connection to all the different payers in the order that we want to bill them. So a couple of things to note. When you're looking up to the top of the screen, if the top of the screen does not mention any kind of insurance that's covering that client, it always means they're treating like a private paying patient, no insurance type patient. So you always have to see the names of the insurances up there, and that comes from the connection in the billing rule. And then we connect the payers in the order that we want to bill them. Sometimes it gets complicated. Sometimes it has to go through 2 or 3 different insurance companies. So it might go something like Extended Healthcare is first. We have to exhaust that. Then it's going to move on to the second extended. Then it's going to move on to motor vehicle. So whatever your situation, you list them top to bottom. And then if you get the order incorrect, we can always move things around with these little arrows. Okay. So no connection in the billing rule at all means they're a private paying patient. So we have to see a connection here to an insurance company show up at the top of the screen. Usually when you have connections to insurances, you oftentimes have limits that you want to keep an eye out for. A limit can be about money, treatment plans, authorizations. It can be about number of visits, units. It can be about a time range. This is only good for 6 months and then we lose it. Whatever the situation is. If you enter items in the payer portion area, the system will show that as a countdown at the top of the screen, and it's interactive. Every time we treat the patient, those numbers deplete a little bit at the top. So this is the only tab that's really interactive at the top. There is a second tab for those of you maybe who haven't seen the treatment plan tab before. You can enter in specific authorizations or treatment plans in this area. You can say they're authorized for 10 of these codes and 4 of these codes and 2 units of this and that and the other thing. And it will list your authorizations in this screen. And it will also tell you in here how many you listed were approved versus how many you've used to date. But you do have to come into this screen to see how many you've used. The only thing that's really interactive and always at the top of the screen is your billing rules tab. Okay. If you have billing rules, then you oftentimes have policy and claim information that follows. Depending on your insurance company, sometimes they have authorization numbers, claim numbers, workers' comp motor vehicles have those. Sometimes for extended, you have IDs and group numbers. Depending on your insurance, usually depends on where you put your numbers. And then on the right-hand side is your policyholder information. Okay. So all that reflects a little bit about what you might see next in the scheduler. So we're talking about these little pictures that are showing up on the scheduled appointments, and you'll notice that some patients have the little money bag and some patients don't. That definitely comes from the billing rule. The little money bag showing up on the appointment does not really mean that a patient has a balance outstanding or owes you money. It more so means they have a responsibility according to the billing rule. If we treat them today, we're probably going to want to collect money. Heads up, try to get money. If they don't have the little money bag, usually that means the billing rule is stating whoever's paying the bill seems to be paying the full amount or they're 100% covered. So no need to get money today from that client. Okay. So next we're going to learn typically what happens. Now that we've got appointments scheduled, we've got the patient set up in a certain way, now things are going to start to happen. They're going to show up and we're going to do a series of steps. So typically what we're trying to do is 4 separate steps on every single patient. And I'm going to teach you all 4. And what you're trying to learn from today is how you're going to implement the 4 steps at your clinic. It might not go perfectly like 1, 2, 3, 4, like I'm going to train you on. Your clinic might go 1, 4, 3, 2. You're just trying to learn independently what those steps are. Okay. Now, before we get started, in Canada, there are a ton of different ways and rules that we have to bill different payers. So a lot of your settings that we spoke about in session number 1 pertain to your province. So remember, in Ontario, as an example, you have very specific things that you have to do and enter to set up for HCI billing, for OHIP, workers' comp, and TELUS billing. TELUS billing actually affects all Canadian billing. For Alberta, sometimes you have special items you want to appear on the paper invoicing. For BC, we have special billing for ICBC, MSP, and workers' comp. So just remember, you have to have very specific settings set up. If anyone on the phone with me today was not here for session number 1 and you're curious, you don't know what I'm talking about, what is that setup that I need to do for my province, at the end I'll show you where you can contact me and I will send you some specific instructions in there. Okay. So I am going to start with Mr. Private Pay Patient up here in green on today's scheduler. He's the guy that has no insurance at all. So we're going to try the 4 different steps. Okay, I'm going to point them out. Actually, let me highlight them here for you. Just give me one moment here. I just have somebody who has joined us and says they can't hear me, so just give me 1 second. Okay. So the 4 steps that we're going to talk about, step 1 is attendance. We're going to, in theory, know that on every single patient. Did they show up? Did they cancel? Did they no-show? We're always going to know the answer to that question. Step 2 is going to be a charge. Can we tell the system what treatments or assessments this patient is here for? Step 3, can we take a payment from anyone today? Step 4, can we produce any kind of invoice or receipt for that patient? Okay, so let's break that down a little bit and do that in detail. So Mr. Private Pay Patient here, the first step is attendance. Can we say whether this guy showed up, canceled, or no-showed? We're going to say yes, so we're going to say this guy showed up. So if this patient showed up, we know they're booked with a PT, we know that this is a private paying patient, good chances are we're going to be charging this patient for some kind of physio treatment or assessment. So step 2 would typically happen next. Little white hand, we would click to enter treatments and assessments. So you just start at the top and then you work your way down. I'm going to show you the long way and then we're going to show you how to speed this up. So at the very top, we just confirm, is this the right claim? Yes. Is this the right date? Yes. What is our fee code we feel like charging today? If it didn't already know a suggestion for us, we would have to pick a code. From there, Is this the right therapist? Yes. Is this the right amount of money? Yes. I also have authority to override that. So if you also have authority, you can always move your numbers around. And then you go to the top right. Where is the money going? He's a private paying patient who doesn't have any other options for funding. So all the charge, 100% of that charge is going directly to the patient. That is correct. Diagnostic codes, not required at all for usually anyone other than motor vehicle, sometimes ICVC workers' comp. So not required, optional if we feel like entering it, but not required. So if all looks good, we're going to hit the add button on the bottom right until we see that charge in the bottom section of the screen. Nothing is official until it makes it to the bottom section. From here, we could just repeat the process. If there's more things to charge this patient, we just keep going. Go back up, pick another code, $90 going to the patient. Yep, I like that. Add that to his chart. Pick another code. Yep, I want to charge him for an ice pack, $25. Yep, that looks good, 25, add. I could just stay here all day and add. Once I've added all the things I want to charge this patient for, I'm all done, so I'm going to say OK to complete that. So that was step 1, attendance. Step 2, the charge. In theory, all patients should have at least those 2 steps. Step 2 will visually appear on your appointment. So when the little hand used to charge your patient shows up on your appointment, that means you have successfully charged that appointment on that day with that therapist some kind of treatment or assessment. So in theory, everybody showing up gets charged some kind of treatment or assessment. Okay, moving on to step 3. Can we take a payment? Can we use this little pile of money to take a payment from anyone? In theory, yes. This patient has a balance of $220. We could probably take a payment from them. So step 3, who's paying? How much? When are they paying? What's our method of payment? We just fill in the blanks. We record the actual numbers. Step 4 is to produce some kind of invoice or receipt. Can we give the patient an invoice and a receipt for this? We can also do that step 4 while we're in step 3. Oftentimes when we're paying for services we just rendered, who usually doesn't want an invoice or receipt to walk away with? So that's a step that's included in step 3. You could also not do it in step 3 and just do it separately, but it's included in step 3. You just have to tick the little box. Produce an invoice and a receipt. From here, we're going to commit to that by saying OK, and we can do a preview before we further commit. This is what it's going to look like if we decide to keep it. So this is called a generic everyday normal invoice. It's showing all the dates of service. It's showing what the services are, who rendered them. It's showing pricing. It's showing the payment from the patient. So now it's acting as a receipt at the same time. It's reminding them of their next scheduled appointment. We've got a custom message on here from our settings from the first session. So this in theory is what the patient is going to receive if we like this. So I'm going to close this preview. So in order to keep this, to commit to this fully, we have to do one of the post options. If we post print, we're going to get a hard copy, give the patient a piece of paper. If we post email, we're going to be sending it to the patient electronically instead. Or post only, meaning nobody wants a paper, nobody wants an email, but we at the front desk want to keep this. We want to make this official. So for training purposes today, nobody wants a copy, nobody wants an email. We're going to say, yep, let's keep it, let's post it. So a couple of things will happen when I post. I posted enough payment that took away the balance at the top of the screen, so nothing showing at the top means the patient has no balance. My little money bag on my appointment is actually showing a money symbol, and that means the money bag is full of money. We did record a payment today. So if we think about all the steps now that would make my patient complete, whatever that is to you, my list is patient showed up, we charged him, step 2, we took his money, step 3, we gave him an invoice and a receipt, step 4, I asked him to book a future appointment, he has a future appointment, there's really nothing left I can do. That would be a check him off my list, he's a completed appointment. Okay. So let's move on to another type of patient. Mr. Workers' Comp has full coverage, let's say. Step 1, attendance. We're going to say he showed up. Step 2, we're going to charge him for a service. Service is probably going to be a different fee code on the list, something that we're going to charge workers' comp. And when I look at the cost on that charge and where the cost is going, it should, in theory, be going to their third-party insurance. That looks good. I can always move my numbers around, but that looks good according to the billing rule. Depending on your province and the needs of that payer, you might have to record diagnostic codes, you might not. So when things look good, you officially add that to the patient's chart. If all looks good from there, you commit to this by saying OK. Little white hand should appear on the screen. That's your visual that you did charge the patient for treatments and assessments. So now if we ask ourselves step 3, can we take a payment? Probably not. This patient doesn't have a money bag. They have full coverage through their insurance. Really no need to take any money from the patient. Therefore, step 4, can we send an invoice or receipt anywhere? Probably not. We're probably going to end up billing that out at the end of the month or whenever that patient ends their plan of care. Okay, so step 3 and 4 probably wouldn't happen. So we would ask ourselves, what makes this patient complete? He showed up, I charged him, I don't really have to do anything till the end of the month. His name is in italics. I did ask him to book a future appointment. He's going to call me back later. That would be a completed appointment. Okay, so now let's get nice and complicated. Mr. Extended Healthcare. I'm just going to show you what I've done on the setup. I'm going to hit the Enter button to go into his profile. I'm going to move through his Billing Rules tab. I have chosen to set this patient up with a partial coverage. He has 80% coverage through his insurance with a maximum of $500, and that's reflecting at the top of the screen. He's got a countdown up there of $500. Okay, so as we go through the steps on this patient, step 1 is attendance. He showed up. Step 2 is a fee code. We're going to charge him for some kind of assessment or treatment code on the list. We're going to choose the same one at $100. That $100 is doing something called splitting. The responsibility of that $100 is splitting between insurance and patient. 80% is going here, 20% is going here. I can still move my numbers around from there if I need to. But if all looks good, my payer doesn't require a diagnostic code. This is a TELUS type payer, by the way, that we're simulating. We're going to add this officially to the chart. If all looks good, we're going to commit to this by saying OK. So step 2 should have a little white hand appear on the appointment, and it does. I just want to note 2 things are happening at the top of the screen. It's now creating a patient for the balance. A balance for the patient, at the top of the screen, and it has depleted a little bit of my coverage for the insurance. Okay, step 3 would happen next. Can I take money from anyone? Yes, we're going to try to get that $21 from the patient. So step 3 from my patient, I'm going to try to record my $21. I'm also going to do a step 4. I'm going to give them an invoice and a receipt for that $21. OK to move forward, preview to see what it looks like. The invoice should indicate that the full charge was actually $100. Your portion, Mr. Patient, was $20. You paid your $20, taxes $21. You paid your $21. Here's your receipt for that paid in full. So it's an invoice and a receipt all in one. I'm going to close the preview and I'm going to commit to this with a post only. Nobody wants a copy, but I want to make it official. So steps 1, 2, 3, 4 are done. We also have another step 4 that we can do right now. We can invoice the rest of that out to the extended healthcare. In fact, that could have been the first thing we did. So if I hit the little icon now to invoice, another step 4, my scenario is that I'm invoicing an extended healthcare TELUS type payer. So not Blue Cross or Green Shield, but a TELUS funder. I'm going to say OK to commit to this. And when I have a TELUS type funder on my screen, I'm going to get a send button. Instead of print it to paper and email it and post it, I can actually send it directly through to TELUS. Okay. Typically, I still always want to do a preview before I do that. Of course, I forgot I don't have TELUS on my screen, but the preview will tell me if something's wrong or if there's a reason why I can't send this through to TELUS. And this message is telling me my setup is not complete for TELUS. I'm not able to actually send it through yet. For those of you at the clinic level who have not set up for TELUS yet, you're going to get that same message until you do. Otherwise, you're going to be able to hit the send button. And just to review, the settings for TELUS specifically come from this area called your TELUS Health invoice settings. You must have usernames and passwords. You must have a translation on your fee codes. You must have all your providers set up with their CPR numbers from TELUS. And then your payers must have a match to the TELUS Health payers. Okay. On that patient, I also want to show you one more thing for a TELUS type patient. I'm going to hit the enter button to go into their profile again. When you have a TELUS type patient and you have connected them to an official TELUS type payer, you will get consent forms that show up in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. One of the other requirements for TELUS before you can transmit a charge directly over to them is that you have the consent form signed by your client. So you can do that one of two ways. If you click the actual bar that says confirm and print out the consent form, it will fill in the information from your client profile and then give you the official form to print out and have the patient sign. If you've already done that on your own or through the website, you can tick the box on the left, and that tells the system you've already gone through the motions of printing out a form and having it signed by the patient. Okay, and that would do a submission. You can also do the same kind of thing in Ontario through HCI, workers' comp. It's the same type of setup, same scenario. When you get to the point that you're invoicing, you will eventually get a send button. But the system will tell you if there are certain things wrong before you can send. Okay, so typically that's what you're trying to do on all your clients. You're trying to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 every time the client comes in. Some patients only have 1 and 2. Some patients don't pay you every date, so you can't do a step number 3 and take a payment. But you're trying to ask yourself every time a patient comes in, can I do these 4 steps? And then visually, you're trying to balance yourself at the end of the day. If all day long you're doing these 4 steps, visually you want to look at your calendar and try to identify things that might be missing some information. 90% of your patients will probably look like this. They'll have a green check mark and a white hand at some point. So eventually the ones that don't have that will start to stand out a little bit. Okay. Now, balancing at the end of the day, sometimes visual's not enough. We've missed a couple of things maybe, or visually looking at it, we still can't figure out what is it that I entered. I see I entered something on this patient, but what did I enter? So we suggest 2 reports that you run every day. And your day is subjective. It doesn't have to be the current day. It's whenever you're ready to balance your day. But we suggest you run these 2 reports for every date. And they come from the reporting section, and they're both under operations. The first one is called your daily reconciliation. And when you run this report, you can put in whatever date range you need. We suggest you do it every day, but you can also run this for 3 days ago, a week ago, whatever you need to do. So that report shows a number of different things all happening at the same time. The first little summary is showing you your revenue, your little white hands. It's counting all those little white hands. So it's saying, here's all the codes we charged for during this time. It's counting units, it's counting visits, it's counting hours duration with the clients and giving you a summary. The first little balance is usually something like the number of visits that we've charged for should probably equal the number of people attending in the scheduler. Okay, so your next little summary on the list is your scheduler. It's counting all the appointments from all the therapists. Hey, Heather, you had 10 cancels, 2 no-shows, 4 attends. We shouldn't really have anybody still in pending on that report. And again, the number of people attending should probably equal the number of visits that we've charged for. If we're not balancing there, we're probably out. The next little summary from there is the payment journal, payment summary. All the cash, Visa, MasterCard, American Express. It's giving us a total. We should probably balance against that total. Activity summary are all the brand new patients that we've entered into the system during that time, and it's tracking whether we're putting them into divisions and keeping track of where they were referred by. The next little summary is pretty much why everybody runs this report. So billing reconciliation is typically what you don't want to see on your report. There are two sections though. The first little part is saying these people attended their appointments, they had a balance, and they didn't pay their balance. That does happen all the time. That's okay. So you don't want to see big balances usually on your patients, but that part of the report, that's going to happen. The next part of your report, though, is saying, I think we have a problem. I think we might have missed some of these patients. So if anyone is listing here, it's saying these patients didn't have cancels or no-shows on their appointment, but they don't have any kind of charge. The little white hand is not on their appointment. If they show up on the list and they have a little star next to their name, it means we did charge them for something, but the something still isn't a visit. And visits are usually treatments and assessments. So usually this means we charged them for something we sold to them, but we didn't charge them for their actual appointment, their visit, their attendance, their treatment. And then we go back to the scheduler and we look at these patients and say, yes, why do these appear like we missed them? And then we would fix them up. Okay, so that's the first report we run. If we decide on that report, we do identify a mistake. Oh yes, why is Mr. Test wired client showing up on the list? It does appear we haven't got any attendance, we haven't got a charge. Oh, I forgot this guy was a no-show. Fix him up, and then move on to the next one. Okay. The next report that we would run then is also under operations, and it's called your revenue report. It's just the little white hands next that we focus on. So the first report shows us if we think we missed any little white hands, we missed charging a patient, then we look at the charges. So on the revenue report, again, for whatever range of time you're looking for, and if you're a biller, sometimes you want to show injury information as well. And that would include things like diagnostic codes, modifiers. And that report is very detailed, but just the charges. And what you're trying to do is reconcile on this report. If your patient is a self-paying patient, we probably shouldn't see motor vehicle codes. Or if they're a motor vehicle patient, maybe we're looking for diagnostic codes. We're probably looking to make sure we haven't charged 2 assessments in the same day on the same patient twice. Okay. Does this fee code look right? Is that the right rate for that patient? And then from this report, sometimes we're identifying mistakes. Whoops, I charged that patient twice. Whoops, I shouldn't have charged that patient that code altogether. I've got to go fix it. So back in the scheduler, if we get started from the scheduler, the 3 steps that you're constantly doing over here, step 2, 3, and 4, charging, paying, receipting, that's creating a bunch of history on the right-hand side with these little books. Little books are called history screens or activity screens. So typically, if you're trying to fix something or go back and see what was entered or reprint something, you're going to go to the history or activity screens to do that. So on your patient, if you go to activities by service, that would be a list of all the services that have been entered to date and where those services are at. On the right, you have columns marked charged, billed, paid, due. So charging a patient is the little white hand. That's how they get something in the charge column. The billed column is only invoiced items. If your charge isn't on an invoice, it won't be on the billed column. It'll be called unbilled. And then the paid column only shows up when you have a payment recorded against it. Okay. So typically, let's go back to the schedule. I'm going to choose Mr. Private Pay here and go into his history. If you expand any of the charges, it'll break it down by the same symbol. So here's the charge with tax. Here's the invoice or the receipt. Now that we see the invoice and receipt, we can print it. Here's the payment that paid it. So that's what's filling out those 3 columns on the right: charge, billed, paid. Okay. If you do need to make a change in here, sometimes you're flagging an item, editing that item, or you're flagging an item and trashing it, or you're adding new services, or you're taking a payment. So the history screen is usually where you come to change something or look something up that's happened in the past, but you can also do whatever's on that function bar. You can add new services there as well. Okay. So I'm going to open up the floor again so that everybody has their speaker phone. If I have missed any questions in the texting area, I apologize for that. So those are kind of the basic things that I would tend to show people along the way for items that would tend to happen at the front desk. Is there any questions so far that anyone has?
Hi, Heather. We weren't able to view the screen because when we joined, we were told that you're going to be putting us on mute. So okay. Unfortunately, we weren't able to join in to see the visual part of the screen.
Okay. Yep. Oh, no problem. So you didn't get the GoToMeeting invite?
No, we didn't.
That's okay. Okay, no problem. This will be posted. This is a recorded session, so this will be posted on the website, I would imagine, in about a week or so.
Okay. Because we just listened to the audio part via telephone with you. Unfortunately, we didn't get to follow along with your tutorial.
For sure, no problem. And you'll be able to watch the video in probably a week or so where you can have the video and audio together.
Okay. So how would we know, like, it's is there, like, would you be sending out back an email to us to let us know that it's up? So
yep, I do believe so. Yep, I believe Michelle's going to contact everybody on the list today. Yep, and then just let you know when it's loaded.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. Did anyone else have any questions for today? I'll just show you guys if you ever do need assistance or if you ever need some help or you find later you want to ask me a question after the fact. When you're logged into Practice Perfect at the very top of the screen, if you go to the word help and then go to about, that is always how you get your contact information. There is an email address there for support, but if you use that and just replace the very first part with my name, Heather, then it will come directly to myself. Okay. Another good option on here for those that don't know, we have a university site, just a link to a bunch of videos on our website, but pretty much all the little training videos on how to schedule an appointment, all the things we did today, how to take a payment, how to make an invoice, how to enter a patient, all those things are available in a little video at the Learning Center as well. Okay. And then the last thing I'll show you, when you're under the Help menu, to keep up to date with all the new releases and all the new features and functions that are available within the system, like faxing and wired client and new report options that are available, always go to Help and then Release Notes. That'll take you to a link on our website. It'll list when the latest version of the software was launched and what's in that latest version if you choose to update. And then that way you can keep up to date. Okay.
Heather, I have a question about the TELUS billing through Practice Perfect.
Sure.
So we usually do all of our billing for extended health benefits through the TELUS website rather than using Practice Perfect. And the reason we do that is on that site we get a report right away that tells us what they're going to pay. So let's say they have $500 coverage, but we don't know that they already used $200 worth of coverage.
Yes.
And so we're billing and we're invoicing, you know, say that 80 and 20 split, but really we're only going to get $60 on one of them. So how does that work when you've already invoiced something on Practice Perfect? Then you got to change your invoice, and now the patient owes $40 instead of $20. How does that work with the direct billing through Practice Perfect?
Kind of the same way. So you're going to get the exact same pop-up exactly as you would on the website. The only difference is that instead of having to go to the website to enter those details to get the pop-up, that's kind of where you would do it in Practice Perfect instead, right? You would hit the send button, and then immediately you would get your pop-up saying this patient is at a coverage, they have a deductible, they've used up all their coverage, whatever the case may be. And then you would have to edit the services within Practice Perfect from there.
So has your invoice already been produced, though?
Yep, your invoice would have been produced at that point. So your choice is
when you edit, you're taking your invoice back out again.
Well, you wouldn't, not necessarily, but you could record a payment and then transfer the balance to the patient, right? Because it's going to tell you how much is being paid. But yes, you would either have to void out the invoice, edit the charge, and make the amount you want go to the insurance company versus the patient, and then reissue the invoice, but do a post only.
Okay, but the system is integrated so that there is a pop-up and that information comes up.
Yes, yep. And if you want to see it, like you can watch a little video and it would show you what will happen on your screen when you submit something to TELUS. Go to that little help and about and go to the Learning Center, and you'll see for Ontario there's a bunch of TELUS videos. I believe there's one called, like, have a look and see what it looks like to transmit.
Okay.
And then it will show you what will happen.
Okay, sounds good.
Excellent.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else with a question I can assist today?
Heather, I'm curious. I saw when you guys were putting the post invoice that it had the appointment reminder at the bottom of the screen.
Yes.
How did you set that up?
Yeah, it's just from a setting, actually. So if you go to settings at the top of the screen and choose customize your invoice format.
That doesn't apply to us.
Are you still watching my screen?
I'm still watching, yeah.
Awesome. And then there's 2 tabs there for client. And just make sure this little option is selected. Show the next appointment, including the provider.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else have any questions before we go? Okay, guys. If you do find afterwards that you came up with some questions, you just didn't think about them on the fly, and you still want to get a hold of me, of course, go to Help and About and just shoot an email out to me at any time. That's no problem. And otherwise, we do have 2 more training sessions, I believe, coming up every Wednesday for the next 2 Wednesdays. So if you're not on the list, either let myself or Michelle know, and then she'll get you signed up. Okay. Thanks for attending, everyone. You're going to see the meeting end on your